The programming world can be overwhelming sometimes because when you look online, you start to see all these different programming languages and programming tools. And how do you know which one you need to learn? And how will you have enough time to learn all of these tools and languages? When I was in university, I only learned one programming language, and that was C. Then I went to my first job and I learned C++, Python, Java, and JavaScript. Then I went to my second job and I learned C#. So that's a total of 6 different programming languages. And how did I learn these languages? In this video, I'll be sharing my experience, and hopefully by sharing my experience, it'll give you clarity and vision on how you can learn the right programming languages without getting frustrated and overwhelmed. So my name's Henrik, and I'm here to help you learn the software skills and tools you need to grow in your software development journey. And let's get started. By the way, if you're in the early stages of your programming journey, I've got a special gift for you. It's called my 30-day beginner coding challenge. And it's a guide that will take you from no coding experience to building your first 4 projects. And the best part is it's free. It's a free gift to you. In this coding challenge, I guide you in 30 days to build 4 programming projects, and I give you some tutorials that are in C. But of course, these projects are really generic and really beginner friendly, and so you can actually code them in different programming languages. You can still benefit from this guide because you can just take the principles that are in my challenge and then apply them to your programming language. You can find the challenge in the link in the description, and if you download it and pay attention to what it says, you'll definitely learn some fundamental programming concepts that will give you a good foundation to your software development journey. So the first key part of my story is that I learned C first. Like I mentioned, I learned C in university, and that gave me a good foundation for learning other programming languages. And that's because C is considered a low-level programming language, and the other languages that I mentioned are more higher level languages. When you learn the lower level languages first, it gives you a good foundation because it's on the lower level. But actually it's because it really helps you understand how the computers think. When you understand how computers think and how computers store data, that gives you a good intuition when you're learning the other higher level languages. So when you're learning the other higher level languages, you can have this intuition in mind. And so that really helped me when I was learning these other languages. When I was learning C in my university, I learned a lot of valuable skills like learning how to debug, learning about how to write unit tests, and then also learning about how to write readable code and following good coding conventions. The key programming concepts that I learned in C that really helped me learn other programming languages was pointers and structures. And that's because it really gave me an intuition on how data is actually stored in the computer's memory. Having a really good understanding of how data is stored and manipulated in your program is really key to know because it can alleviate a lot of misunderstandings of how your code actually works. C gives you a lot of control over your data, and so C is really powerful, but with great power comes great responsibility, so you have to make sure you're handling your data correctly. In the higher level languages, you have less control over the data, and those languages will take care of the data for you. And so that's why those higher level programming languages are sometimes a lot easier to program in rather than C. But having that background in C, I was able to pick up the other higher level languages pretty fast because they were doing things that I was doing manually, and so they were a lot easier to learn and a lot easier to use. I like to compare learning C like learning how to bake cookies from scratch. When you're learning how to bake cookies from scratch, you have to get all the right ingredients and then find the right measurements and combinations of those ingredients and the right cooking process, and then you cook it. But learning the higher level languages to me is like getting the cookie mix from the grocery store, following the directions by adding like some eggs, some water, and then mix it up in the cookie mix and then baking the cookies. So those higher level languages are a lot easier once you have the background of how to bake those cookies from scratch. Alright, the second key factor of how I learned these different programming languages is by doing different projects. So at my first company, it was a research and development company. So every couple of months I was on a different project. And so for each project, they would often put me on a project that would use different programming languages. So that's how I was able to pick up these different programming languages, because every few months I would have to pick up a new language. So for each of these projects, I was often given a code base, and I had to study the code base, figure out how it works, and then do some development on it to test out different theories that my managers or my supervisors were doing research on. When I learned C++, I was looking at the code of a network routing protocol. When I learned Python and Java, I was working on a cybersecurity network tool that prevents cyber attacks. And I was working primarily on the GUI, so I was working a lot in Java. And then when I was learning C#, I was looking at the code of our in-house Windows application. And this Windows application was an application that our hardware team was using to do their hardware testing. For a lot of these code bases, having a debugger was really helpful for me, because with that debugger, I was able to determine or see at what point in the code does it come to a certain part of the code. And so I was coding with Eclipse in Java, and then I was using Visual Studio with C++ and Visual Studio with C#. So using this debugger tool, I was able to understand, and also using Google, I was able to understand how the code was working. And that's how I was able to code in these and learn how to code in these different programming languages. I would look at these code bases, study them, see how they work using the debugger and through Google. And then I was able to do some development on those code bases. When I was at my first company, I also was put on a lot of projects where I had to do Android development. So I learned a lot of Android development there, and my Java skills that I learned from the GUI that I was working on translated over into Android development. And as I was learning Android development, I eventually wanted to make my own Android apps. The personal Android app that I worked on outside of work in my own personal time, that one was an Android app that helped keep track of how often I interacted with different friends and family. In that Android app, I would report when I would interact with certain people, and then the app would tell me people that I haven't interacted with in a while. So it would just give me some reminders of people that I haven't touched base with in a while, so that I could be reminded to touch base with them. So that's the second factor of how I learned these different programming languages. It's really about being on different projects and working on different projects that require different programming languages. Alright, the third factor of how I learned these different programming languages is mentors. So when I was on these different projects at my work, I wasn't just coding by myself. Well, sometimes I was, but there was a lot of times when I was coding with more senior level programmers, and so working with them really helped me grow a lot. So when I was learning Python, C++, and Java, every week they would give me a new feature or a new bug fix that I had to work on, and a lot of times I would have no clue on how to code those things. And so often I would talk to a more senior level programmer, and he would help talk it through with me, and then give me some pointers, give me some advice, and give me some action points on what I could do to be able to accomplish in implementing those features. Talking with that mentor, I was able to learn things like regex and protocol buffers. And in another project, I was doing Android development, and that Android app was doing a lot of interaction with a web server. So I had to work with a web developer, and she was able to help me learn about HTTP requests and responses. For our GUI application for our cybersecurity tool, my supervisor would often go to my office, and then she would show me all the different components of our Java code. And so she gave me a good overall understanding of that code base. And then over time, I didn't really need her that much, and I was able to easily code certain features for the GUI that we were working on. When I was learning JavaScript, we had a web developer in our department, and she was one of the only web developers in our department. We had other web developers in our company, but in our department, she was one of the only ones. And so when she was leaving, they had to find someone to take her code base and take care of it while we were going to hire more web developers. So that was going to be me. So before she left, she spent a lot of time with me, maybe about a week. She showed me the code and showed me how different things work in the code. And so that was my first introduction to JavaScript. So these different mentors were really helpful in helping me pick up these different programming languages. And for me as a young developer, they were really helpful. But I will say that when I went to my second company, and I already had about maybe 7 or 8 years of experience already by then. So they gave me a code base in C#, and I had no experience in C#, and I didn't have anyone who could explain the code to me, because all the developers who worked on that code left the company. So I was the only one working on that code. But because of the skills that I learned on picking up the other programming languages, I was able to pick up C# pretty fairly easily. And I mainly just used our debugger and Google, and I was able to learn how to code in C#. And so that leads me to the conclusion of this video, and as I reflect on my past experience, one key idea really sticks out, and that is when you become a developer, knowing different programming languages really doesn't matter. It starts to become less and less important. What I learned from my experience about learning different programming languages is that the most important thing about software development is figuring out what you're trying to build. And that's because when you figure out what you're trying to build, then you can determine what is the appropriate programming language for what you're trying to build. As a software developer, you really want to find out what is the most efficient way and the easiest way, what is the shortest path to success to coding this software idea that I have in my head. So with all the different programming languages that are out there, we wanted to use Python because we wanted to use a certain Python library for graphs, or we wanted to use protocol buffers, so we coded in C++, or we wanted to do some Android development, so we coded in Java, and so it keeps going and going and going. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of these software developers at my companies, they didn't learn these programming languages first. Instead they wanted to build something, and so they self-learned these different programming languages like I did. So it's all about self-learning. Self-learning is a really important skill to have as a software developer. Self-learning is an important skill to have because our software development world is constantly evolving, and so we have to constantly adapt. And it's not because we're forced to, but it's because we want to. And we want to find the latest technology, the latest skills, the latest tools to make our software a lot faster and more efficient. And my last key takeaway from this experience is just learn what you need to learn. There's so many different programming languages and tools out there. You don't have to learn it all. Just learn what you need to learn to build the thing that you want to build. And like in my experience, you want to push yourself to build more and more projects. And as you're building more projects, it helps you acquire a new set of skills. And as you have those new set of skills, it empowers you to build more complex projects. And it becomes a compounding of snowball effect of you growing and growing and growing. And then before you know it, you'll know a lot of different programming languages and tools and skills like me. And then you'll become a proficient software developer. Alright, that's it for this week's video. I hope it helped you out in giving you an idea and some clarity on how you can start learning different programming languages. Leave a comment down below on what programming languages you're learning right now and what kinds of projects you're building right now. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Alright, like I mentioned earlier, if you're just starting off in your programming journey and you don't know where to start, you can download my 30-day beginner coding challenge. And it's a 30-day guide where I teach you how to build those 4 beginner programming projects. It's really beginner friendly, and I go step by step on how to build each one and go through the tutorials that you need to build each one. So download that in the link in the description. Thanks for watching this video and making it to the end. I really appreciate you, and if you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.